Now, it is day 5 of the nationwide protest in Nigeria. Would we see fewer Nigerians take to the streets? President Bola Tinubu, in his national address yesterday, urged Nigerian youth to halt the ongoing nationwide protest. The president's address attempts to balance acknowledging the citizens' concerns with defending his administration's action so far. He defended his controversial economic policies, including removing the petrol subsidies and, of course, the abolition of multiple foreign exchange systems, framing these as necessary to tackle long-standing issues, despite many Nigerians facing immediate hardship.
After his speech, we saw fewer citizens take to the streets on Sunday. In states like Jos, Osun, and Edo, protesters have made several demands, which include a return of fuel subsidies, improvements in living standards, cuts in the cost of governance, reduction in electricity tariffs, and solutions to escalating insecurity, among others. Joining us is the national coordinator of the Take It Back movement, Sanyaolu Juwon. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. All right, thank you.
Good morning.
All right. We also have joining us this morning the deputy spokesperson to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, Olusola Sanni. Thank you very much for your time with us. All right.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the conversation, gentlemen. I'll begin with you, Mr. Sanni. The president's speech, talk to us about what your thoughts are regarding the president's speech. We've seen widespread criticism about the speech being disconnected from the reality of the everyday Nigerian. Was there any maybe ray of hope or light in that speech?
Yeah, good morning, Nigerians. To answer that question, I think we need to go a bit into the history of this protest itself. This is one protest that the organizers of it have been very generous to the government by the way of putting it up a month or so before the due course of the protest began. And you would expect that once that is done, that literally gives a window for the government to engage this the Nigerians who are behind this protest. But rather than do that, what we saw is a pattern in which government officials, from one minister to the Senate president, talking down on these protesters. And then that naturally made an appeal for the president himself to come out to address the nation and douse the tension. But unfortunately, what President Bola Tinubu did yesterday was to add oxygen to the fire, because his speech did nothing but amplify the anger of Nigerians. He spoke to illusions. He didn't speak to the realities of the hungry Nigerian. He didn't speak to the reality of people who daily are facing uncertain life. Whether you wake up to see if we're killed today or not, you don't know. And then the president there's a crisis, and the president had to come up to talk to the nation. And what he did was what we saw yesterday. I call that a huge disappointment. A huge disappointment. And it represents this dysfunctionality in their system. Thank you.
Let's also, have a similar question to Sanyaolu Juwon. I mean, many people had asked that the president speak to Nigerians, even in the weeks leading to the protest. Eventually, of course, it took about 3 days before he eventually did. Were you expecting anything different from what we heard yesterday morning? And, are you impressed with what, of course, Mr. President delivered in his speech?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm obviously not impressed, and the majority of Nigerians are not impressed. The president's speech yesterday were simply many words without saying nothing. That's exactly what the president did with his speech yesterday. And some of them are quite shocking, yet not surprising. For instance, he made claims about what his government has done over the past 1 year since it got to office. Reading out various statistics that practically did not connect to the life of the average citizen. And one of his achievements, according to him, was the removal of fuel subsidy. And like I said earlier, if the removal of fuel subsidy was such a good idea, I think it would have been better for President Tinubu and all members of National Assembly every member of government to stop purchasing fuel with with taxpayers' money. They should start buying that fuel from their own from their pockets. If 70,000 naira minimum wage was such a smart idea, the president and the rest of the National Assembly, including the rest of his government, should place themselves on such slave wages. So the point here is that President Tinubu and his entire cabinet are completely disconnected from the life of the Nigerian people. They are completely disconnected from the realities that Nigerian people faces every day. They don't buy anything with their money. They don't purchase electricity with their money. They live off the Nigerian people. They live off the sweat and anguish of the Nigerian people. If the hike of electricity tariff is such a smart idea, President Tinubu should pay such hike from his personal pocket, and let's see if they will continue to make all of these outrageous and ridiculous policies that have made Nigeria even far worse than the poverty capital of the world.
Yeah, well, the president is known to be pretty wealthy. I'm not sure he would have a problem paying from his pocket, for a lot of things. But I mean, going further,
yeah, I think that was actually not the point. The point I'm driving at is that the government officials do not feel what the average person feels. So that's exactly the summary of what the point I've just made today. That every of the government official will continue to make these ridiculous policies, especially as pertains to the slave wage. It is largely because they do not live the reality of the average Nigerian person. Yeah. The 70K can hardly buy a bag of rice. So what would anybody do with that? If the president fails to address the question of subsidy removal that had practically plunged, that had been largely responsible for the space of inflation, the inflation we experienced today, over 40% food inflation. Nigerians cannot afford to purchase food in the market. Nigerians cannot afford even gari. This is a very bad statistics, and this is exactly at the achievement of the president over the past 1 year.
Right. Before we go back to Mr. Sanni, I'm going to stay with you. I just want to confirm, you're with the Take It Back movement. So are you saying that none of the things that the president spoke about, the 9.1 trillion naira, government revenue, which of course we've seen in the first half of 2024, the, of course, reduction in percentage of revenue spent on debt servicing from 97 to 68%, the $5 billion amount of legitimate outstanding foreign exchange that has been cleared, the, of course, student loans, the 200 billion naira initial funding for Consumer Credit Corporation, none of those things are convincing enough to you and, of course, the rest of, those who are protesting?
These are just mere statistics. But what is the reality? The reality is that Nigerians are hungry. What is the outcome? The outcome is that thousands of young people are dropping out of school due to astronomical fee increment. The reality is also that many Nigerians cannot even afford to purchase the high electricity tariff. As a matter of fact, many small businesses are shutting down due to this some of these policies, especially the electricity tariff hike. Many public institutions, including universities, have come out to say they can't afford it. So it's many hospitals, even the number of hospitals, including government hospitals, that have begun rationing electricity just because the electricity tariff hike policies. People cannot afford the high cost of electricity, not even corporate entities. So this is exactly the reality. What the president had read out are mere statistics that perhaps only benefit himself and his cronies. But the reality is that Nigerians are worse off in the last 1 year. And there is also something I also picked up from the hypocritical disposition of the president when he was addressing Nigerians. It is the fact that the president made no single mention of or made no single acknowledgement of the demands of the protesters. He completely ignored it as if they never existed, and went on to blame protesters for the violence that were wreaked by the police across the country. It is I think it was the president's speech. It's rather than addressing the concerns of Nigerians, it was a blackmail against Nigerian people.
Let's go back to Mr. Sanni to talk to us about the speech. You've highlighted, I think both of you are on the same page regarding how the president's speech came across, and that really has been the mindset that we've seen across board on social media. How better could they have delivered the speech? What were the key areas that you think they could have tweaked, or what key things could they have mentioned that would have made the speech significantly different and maybe more widely acceptable to Nigerians?
Okay, first off, if you look at the tone and texture of that speech, what it recalls is those speeches delivered by a military head of state in the past, when they talk down on the populace, and they, like this gentleman said, it's a complete disconnect between what happens in the villa of government and what happens in the streets of Nigeria. So that speech, by tone and texture, is off mark. Now, let's come back to the merit of why we are here. I mean, if that speech was to address the concerns of Nigerians and the arguments of the protesters, the major thing of the discontent now is that there is a high sense of perception that the cost of governance in Nigeria is bigger than the economic reality of an average Nigerian. So if you have that as the context of this conflict, of this crisis, you would expect that when the president wants to come to talk to that, you should make certain deliverables open to Nigerians and the protesters that will talk specifically to reducing the cost of governance. The president said yesterday about, like my colleague said, reading economic figures. He could have told us, for instance, that the aircraft that he wanted to buy or that he has bought, he would rescind that decision. Or that he will scrap the office of the first lady that has become a burden on the country. Or make any such pronouncement that the protesters and Nigerians can say, okay, this man too has put off some weight from his side. Or this is a bogus and laborious cabinet. He didn't do any of that. If you are on the street of Abuja, on every 500 meters or 1 kilometer, you will see one siren flying around you because of the oversized government that he has put in place. So those are the things that if he had done it, that speech will have had more credibility. And his failure to have done so only does one thing. It amplifies the argument that this president does not care about the interests and yearnings of average Nigerians.
Just quickly,
he's there for himself and his friends.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a strong one. Does Atiku Abubakar support the protest?
Naturally, yes. Any right-thinking Nigerian will support the protest because the protest specifically seeks a better life for an average Nigerian. So every right-thinking Nigerian should support the protest.
Yeah, but I'm asking specifically about Atiku Abubakar. Does he support the protest? Is he, of course, maybe encouraging Nigerians to?
Yes.
And yes, what would you say, for those who say that, opposition that, members are the ones sponsoring the protest, and maybe accuse Atiku Abubakar of being one of the sponsors of the protest?
You see, when you talk like that, then you are a communicator. When you talk like that in a situation like this, then what you are doing is what they call reverse cycle. Because that particular line of argument, one, is an insult to every Nigerian who is a body of this protest. Two, is that it does the government no good. Because when you come up with that kind of argument, you have eliminated any possibility of your sincerity and credibility on this matter. Does the opposition need to tell Nigerians that there is food inflation? Does the opposition need to tell Nigerians that this president is there for himself and his family and his friends? I mean, these are facts that are very obvious and clear to everyone. The opposition did not, a lot of the policies that led us to this point are solely on the neck of the Tinubu administration. He has no one, absolutely no one to blame for it. He led himself to this point and his cabinet. So the idea of saying opposition sponsor this sponsor is that is a foul path in crisis communication.
All right.
And I think they should desist from that. I think they want to move forward.
Yeah. Lastly, to Mr. Juwon, before we go, you are with the Take It Back movement. Will the protests continue? Are you encouraging protesters to, of course, stay in the streets?
Yeah, protest continues. As a matter of fact, as I speak with you, people are already converging in all parts of the country, including Ojota in Lagos, Abuja, Edo States, Delta. Across the country, people are converging because, as I said earlier, the president's speech did nothing to address the demands of protesters. So protest continues.
Okay. Anyway, we'll see how things turn out. Thank you both for joining us this morning. To the National Coordinator of Take It Back Movement, Sanyaolu Juwon, and also Spokesperson to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Thank you very much for your time. We, of course, would like to reconnect with you both again as things develop. Thanks for joining us once again.